This is the Digital Formula Podcast, a show about digital transformations, why they fail, and how you can apply the formula to ensure that your transformation program will create the expected results. By aligning your services to your strategy, architect solutions well, and deliver them in an agile fashion.
And welcome to another episode of the Digital Formula Podcast. My name is Roland Woldt, and I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host Mike Idengren. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good, Roland. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while, so I'm happy that we're back in the saddle, as one might to say. And speaking of which, and now I'm thinking about how do I get the bridge to the topic of the show, so maybe I don't try it. Today, we want to talk about Agile, lowercase a and uppercase a. And we're happy to have Dani Linn as our local expert in all things Agile on the show. Welcome, Dani.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I know. We're happy to have you. But before we get to this, Dani, can you spend a couple of words talking about yourself, and your background so that our audience knows why do we talk with Dani about this topic and not about anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm the director of agility at Scale for LSA Digital. And prior to my time at LSA Digital, I spent about 8 years with Jacobs Engineering. I was their director of quality and performance excellence, and I was responsible for the entire organization's organizational oversight and alignment of all of their management systems. Before that, I served 13 years in the U.S. Army in logistics, supporting groups like Air Mobility and Air Combat Command to improve their air operations. So essentially, in those 3 roles, I've really honed my skills as a process and performance improvement specialist. So my job has really been to help organizations and individuals by providing them training and coaching and consulting services for things like models, standards, and frameworks, right? So that they can really build robust and tailorable management systems so they can have repeatable and maintainable success and allow them to have measurable improvements in things like flow and overall organizational performance.
Well, I wish I could say that of my 11 years in the German Armed Forces. There was nothing that I would describe that way.
Not even when you were commanding tanks?
Yeah. Sometimes it was a logistical challenge, get everybody on the same page, but I think not at the same scale that you see in organizations or in logistics organizations.
Yeah, I was on like a specialty assessment team, so not your kind of standard day-to-day, maybe military operations. So probably a little bit of a unique experience.
Yeah, well, yeah. But either way, before we get started, maybe you enlighten us a little bit about you as a person. What are your hobbies, your interests, your bucket list items?
Sure. So I'm a pretty avid reader. I'll read just about anything I can get my hands on. World traveler, mom to 2 sweet little girls. Really passionate about just spending time traveling with my family whenever I get a chance. Been to about 44 states here in the U.S. and 28 different countries so far. And, now that my kids are getting old enough, I can drag them along with me. They're helping me research some more places we can add to our bucket list.
Well, that's great. That's great. Mine are out of the house. Both of them live in Europe. So I think I'm a little bit ahead of you in that phase of your life. But hey, let's get to the topic of our today's conversation. Obviously, Agile. Dani, can you explain a little bit around, for those 3 people in our audience who haven't heard that term before, what that actually means and what pain points might be that people or organizations might look for becoming Agile or using Agile practices, and you decide upper or lowercase?
Yeah, sure. So we can talk a little bit about, Agile and how that compares to other models, standards or frameworks, right? Because some people think it's, they hear Agile and they think this is a wholesale to be applied as a process to their organization, right? You've got to do everything that it says here. So we'll talk about those and how they're used to kind of improve your business so that people can understand, why you use these agile practices to improve your business. So agile really is an approach, right, to the way that we do work. It's a set of integrated principles and practices and some different competencies for achieving business agility, right? We want to continuously execute our work in small chunks with what we call a plan, do, check, adjust cycle. We do that in iterative manner. So very basically, we plan the work, we do the work, we check to see what went right, what went wrong, and then we make the adjustments based on empirical data and learning. We're probably going to talk a little bit specifically about, SAFe in the Scaled Agile Framework. So we'll want to level set on what that is and the difference between that and other models and standards or methods. Because a lot of times people will use those labels, they'll use those words interchangeably, but they really have a different purpose and a different place in organizations' pursuit of performance excellence. So a model, something like the CMMI, if you've heard of that, it's a capability maturity integration, right? It's what we call a why-ability and a what-ability model. And in terms of why-ability, it provides descriptions of expected business performance value from the adoption of a set of practices across practice areas. And it's also a what-ability model in the sense that it describes what do we do in terms of successful product development and service delivery.
I hear a couple of things and I try to get my head around this. I get the why and the what, right? But how does that connect to what the people do, right? I think you alluded to it a little bit when you said, we're going to split it in small chunks, but you could do that with everything. So can you explain the connection between those again for dummies like me?
So splitting the work into small chunks, right? When we're talking about, an agile approach, agile is a how ability model, in contrast to, a what ability model. It tells you how, or describes how to implement certain aspects of performance improvement, the techniques, the ceremonies, milestones, events, practices. It's kind of the success pattern for performance and business agility. It's the how piece, right? So that's, your models and your frameworks, and then standards by comparison, they just constitute what's the minimum level of quality in product or service delivery. So the pain points that kind of drive people to use those things, Agile in particular, is pretty obvious, or should be pretty obvious and intuitive to the organization, right? There are things that are observable and measurable, right? So organizations have a tendency, for example, to chronically underestimate their work and overestimate their capability to complete that work. So that sort of results in pain points and things like chronic late deliveries, cost overruns, schedule overruns, lower customer satisfaction, diminishing revenue, low employee morale, issues with retention and recruiting, just to name a handful, right? And then they'll have a tendency to kind of compensate for those things, with, maybe underestimating and underbidding new work and so that they can get another contract. And then that leads them, in sort of a vicious cycle. In systems thinking, we call these archetypes, addiction loops or fixes that backfire, right? So the organization starts searching for ways that they can improve on those pain points. And they kind of are driven to this tipping point, right? So what's this existential crisis, right? That's been brought on by our defeating patterns of behavior, right? Folks want a way to remain competitive and relevant in the digital age, and they recognize in order to survive, they need to make those changes. I'm sure we're all familiar with a company or two, say, prior to COVID, maybe that had a competitive advantage. And then when it was, their moment to shine, they didn't adapt fast enough. Right. And now we don't talk about those people anymore, like Skype, maybe.
So Dani, what made you kind of look around one day and say, there's got to be a better way? How can we do this better based on what you've been seeing?
Yeah. So, I guess I was using a lot of the business practices in Agile without really recognizing what they were. So, when I'm looking back on my career, I realized I was sort of incorporating some of those Agile practices and values in my work before I even had a name for it, right? I was always trying to prioritize work for my team. How do we reduce the work that we have in progress? How do we, perform retrospectives? The military is really big on that, right? What are the actions or details of whatever mission or operation we were on, so that we could incorporate that information and how to do a better job next time. And then, after my time in the military, I joined Jacobs, a software engineering DoD contractor, and they were looking for ways to, get the business benefits of an Agile way of working. And that's kind of how I fell into, Agile and safe from a largely waterfall environment.
Thinking about kind of how we do it. And as you said, this is a how ability model, and we look kind of to principles and models and best practice to figure out how to do things in a better way. And so I know that we talk a lot about the Agile Manifesto, even in what we call little a Agile, right? With scaled aside, right? Just the concept of driving a mindset and approach among project teams to do things in a better way. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that's been working, how an Agile Manifesto and those kind of principles help us, especially with things like customer collaboration and responding to the change?
Yeah. So to kind of work true to the Agile Manifesto, everyone in the organization really needs to change their focus and their mindset from, an inward focus to an outward focus that's based on the customer, which is, who we're really working for. So customer-centricity here it's paramount. So for example, instead of thinking that I work for my boss, and my boss and my boss's boss, right? I need to start thinking of how to better engage with my customer, to meet to better meet their intent. When put into practice, a lot of those Agile principles, they change the focus from being on the process to being on the product and the customer. So they get more of what they want maybe than what they asked for even, right? So I guess one of the other things would be, leadership decentralizing, decision-making, right, out of the hierarchy and moving it to the people who are actually doing the work day to day, the people who are invested and kind of know best what the customer is asking for, realizing the value of and the power of being an enabling servant leader.
That scares me a little bit, to be quite honest. If I'm a traditional organization, does it mean I need to change the ways how I do business completely, or is there some gradual approach to it, or what would be your recommendations for those organizations who don't know if they should jump ship?
Well, I understand where that could be scary, right? The leadership still maintains decision-making, responsibility for centralized decisions, things that have long-lasting impact, things that have, maybe a impact budget, or they're long living. But you want to decentralize the things that are frequent changes, or maybe only have an impact on the team's level because in moving that authority to where the information is, you're gonna build a better product, right? What does the CEO know about putting their hands on keyboards to build software? They really don't. Might understand the customer's vision or mission, but they don't have the day-to-day information. And so the people who are actually doing the work have better insight into building something that's going to be successful. So they would probably make a better decision at that level.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there's also tools that help facilitate those coordination and all those things that then obviously will roll up to a certain level of aggregation.
Leadership is responsible. They're responsible for the mission and the strategic vision, right? But the people doing work, they're responsible for the execution. So, you put certain practices into place so that you can, work with your leadership to tie that strategy to the execution of the day-to-day, right? And
yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And speaking of which, you can't believe it. Time flies. We're roughly at the half point of this episode. So I want to give our listeners a little break so that all those thoughts can now be sorted out. And we're going to have a little break and come back right after this.
Do you have that feeling like something may not be right with your service delivery or how you're using your ServiceNow platform? LSA Digital is your partner in turning that around. We understand that every organization is unique, which is why we offer a free 30-minute consultation to identify the perfect fit assessment for you. Whether you're looking to refine your current practices or undertake a thorough transformation, our tailored assessments align with your goals to deliver actionable insights and measurable outcomes. Connect with us today. Let's unlock the full potential of your ServiceNow platform and service management practices. LSA Digital. We're not just consultants. We're your strategic allies for ServiceNow and service management optimization.
All right, Dani, thanks for giving us some ideas about the kind of the overall agility, the reasons that we use it, kind of the principles of it. Now we'd like to kind of get in a little bit of the how we actually go about taking the first steps. In many organizations, it seems kind of like an area that's kind of scary that they haven't really gone into before. And they might want to kind of understand how they can start small and kind of scale up when they need it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. First, can you give us some idea, if you're in an organization and you're saying, hey, what steps should I take to get into scaling Agile or even just doing Agile at all?
Yeah. So organizations, I guess I would say the first initial step is getting educated, right? Training is an investment in alignment, right? It's kind of the Rosetta Stone from this is what we were doing before to like where we want our future state to be. So the organization's leadership needs to lead by example and first become educated so they understand the business reasons for scaling and their role in that roadmap. And only then will other folks, have the desire or the will to be compelled to also make the change along with them. After that, I would say the organization scales its practices when it needs it, right? You become agile by doing the things, right? By changing the way that you work. The structure of SAFE really enables agile adoption all the way from just one team delivering one simple product to an entire enterprise that delivers very complex products via multiple teams. Once you realize that there are dependencies and risks that need to be managed across multiple functions, multiple teams.
Hey, Dani, you mentioned SAFE. The Scaled Agile Framework a couple of times by now. I'm not sure if everybody in our listenership is familiar with that concept and what SAFE is, because at least in my understanding, it's not only an organization, it's also an approach. how to scale agile for organizations. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So it's a knowledge base. It's a knowledge base. It's success patterns, right? It's principles, practices, a set of competencies, right? That are intended to support organizations in achieving business agility, right? Why do they want to do that? Well, or what are the business benefits of doing that? Increase in productivity, improvements to quality. You're looking for faster time to market. You want your employees to be more engaged and have better job satisfaction. So SAFE kind of aggregates best practices and best of breed things from Agile and Lean and DevOps to create this framework, right? It's not plug and play, right? Every organization has unique challenges and constraints. So you take what you need from it and to improve the areas that you're looking to optimize.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. But can you elaborate a little bit more? Because I can see the danger that organizations try too much, they overextend themselves, I alluded a little bit to this in the first part when I said, hey, do I need to change my ways of working, but I'm pretty sure there's a way to avoid that trap, and do have like a staggered implementation of Agile. So what strategies, what approaches can an organization take who bought into the value prop to implement Agile in their organization?
Right. So you definitely don't want to overextend yourselves. You want to take a phased approach. The framework actually has an implementation roadmap that you can sort of follow that success pattern. They lay it out for how you can, like what we do here, start small and scale up, right? It shows people what works and what doesn't, gives an opportunity to incorporate the lessons learned into future work so you can mitigate resistance. Change fatigue is a very real thing, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to take an intentional approach to limit the number of changes that are occurring simultaneously, right? So that we can get better data on what to leverage, what to adapt for the next set of teams without burning everybody out. So pilot teams, and change agents, folks that are going to champion for you, right? What were the personal benefits of adopting Agile? Those folks are going to become your evangelists and your promoters of the new way of working. It's been my experience that leadership often presents the biggest resistance to change. That's the biggest challenge, which is really why that first step is so crucial, right? Getting them educated on Scaled Agile and how it's going to benefit them and their business.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the leadership concept, and especially, and you started hinting at influential folks kind of leading the charge, and folks look at them and saying, well, if they're doing it, well, maybe we can do it. And I think this all kind of tiptoes around the concept of culture change, right, Dani?
Yeah, right. So like I was saying, right, there's no plug and play solution. Every organization has unique challenges. You don't want to apply the framework as your process. You want to apply your learning of the framework to your specific implementation. You do that by tailoring and customizing the recommended Agile practices to suit your unique problem space, right? And whatever your unique program constraints are. Not every Agile practice is going to apply equally in every scenario, right? So we want leadership to really ground themselves, ground the process using fundamentally stable values and principles, right? That way we can be comfortable and confident that the decisions that we're making are the right ones. This is really a Herculean effort to kind of change a mindset and change, practices and processes for your whole organization, which is why, leaders need to lead the charge. When you're talking about new methods and practices, you really have to fully have an appreciation for how difficult fundamental culture change is going to be. Continuous improvement, continuous learning, it's an attitude that is really needed to influence behavior changes until those behaviors and those practices become innate, so that you can produce those better outcomes. It's definitely not just a matter of changing the mechanics of the way that we work. So yeah, leaders are crucial in sort of fostering an environment where people really can learn, they can experiment, they can sort of fail forward, right? Understanding their role sort of as that servant leader to encourage that, is crucial.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about measuring success of these leaderships and teams that are actually trying to get into Agile and trying to change their practices. So, we've all heard of tools like Jira and the kind of tools that let us create tickets and do the work and close them. And then we get these metrics out of them like velocity and sprint burn down points and that kind of stuff. But can you give us some effective ways? Talk a little bit about how we can think about those metrics in comparison to the ones that really matter. Like, what are the effective ways organizations can really measure their success of their agility initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So, few different things. We want to understand what the business value is, right, of the things that we're building or the services that we're providing. Business value can be measured with KPIs and OKRs. Employee engagement and satisfaction, right? The people are the ones who do all the work, right? So we want to sort of survey them, current state, before and then, during the Agile transformation. But I would say, most importantly is measuring predictability and flow, right? Flow measurements are used to measure efficiency. How efficiently and effectively are you delivering to your customer on your commitments? Predictability. What's the actual business value of the things that you have planned versus what you've ended up delivering, to kind of inform you where you need to focus for the best return on your investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do have a last question, and I'm looking at the little clock in the upper right-hand corner of our recording software. One last question, quick answer, please. When I, as an organization, now convinced that I want to change, what would be the things when I think about the timeline, an effort, activities, what would I buy into if I say, okay, I want to introduce this to my organization? Think about whatever phases or tools and all those type of things. What's ahead of me as an organization?
Yeah. So first, starting with people, training the people who can guide to that change, your executives, your managers, your leaders, determining what it is you actually want to do. So organizing your teams around the value that you want to deliver. What are we building? Why are we building it? Form the teams that can do that, right? In a vertical slice, all the way. If you're building software, for example, everything from your database, your middleware to your user interface, and then scale that through your organization in fractals, right? From your teams to your programs to your portfolio, so that you can, accelerate that change incrementally.
So now, thanks, Dani, for all that explanation. The biggest question that I have left is obviously, well, how can I reach that Dani person? I'd like to continue the conversation. Where can I find you?
Sure. So you can reach me at Dani.Linn at LSA Digital. Be happy to respond to your emails and inquiries there.
Oh, perfect. Well, then, at least from my perspective, Mike, I don't know if you have an additional comment. I'd like to thank you for that insightful conversation and being a guest on the show. And I hope we see you very soon again to another topic. I do have some ideas that we can talk about. And for all of you out there, dear listeners, thanks for hanging in with us, listening to this next episode that we have. And if you like what you hear, you can do us a favor. Just tell your 5 best friends about this podcast so that we can grow a little bit. And with that, I wish you a happy day.